Welcome back to the Safety Gap. Today's guest is Parminder Batra, CEO of TraknProtect. From a moment of helplessness in a Vegas hotel room to building one of the leading safety tech companies in hospitality, Parminder is a force for change. She joins us to talk about the soul of hospitality, the real stakes of safety, and why trust, not just tech, is what hotels must rebuild. So let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody, to our latest episode of the Safety Gap podcast. I'm your co-host, Cassidy Shield, and Karin is with me today. Karin, how are you doing?
Happy Friday.
Were you on the road this week?
Okay. I'm so excited to report that I have been in the home office for about 9 days.
That's amazing.
And
That's
is
a record.
Like a record.
That is a record.
Yeah. So I'm very excited that I'm home. However, I'm also itching to pack my bag and head out on Monday. So yeah.
We have the company offsite next week, which is very exciting. And then I assume, Karin, you run the gauntlet after that. You're probably not home for a while.
This will be a very busy summer, so a very quick personal trip. I get to go and see a friend get married, and then we're conference season. So we've got Nina, we've got ABCO, I've got some other trips coming up. So I'll be visiting folks across the country, and that leads into the fall where fall conference season starts. So yes, it will be a very busy summer. I've already warned the kids, but maybe they'll pop up with me on a trip here and there.
Well, that would be fun. Well, let's welcome our guest, Parminder Batra. Parminder, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I was going to say, Karin, you're itching to go after 9 days? I've been home for a month and I've been like, oh my God, this is awful. I love being home.
I'm ready. I need to be with my people.
And Parminder, we did not discuss this before the call, but home for you is, am I right? It's the Chicagoland area?
It is Chicago. I live in the city, so the heart of Chicago.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I live in the western suburbs of Chicago, so it's we're in the neighborhood, sort of.
Well, it's a warm day today, right?
Very nice.
The weather's finally turning. Yeah.
I'm looking forward. Kids are out of school, so that was the big news this week. Kids are out of school, so summer has started for them at least.
Yeah, we had a sleepover already, so sleepover season has begun. But I'm excited to also say, for the first time recently, I made it out of the airport in Chicago, and I got to see parts of the city and eat some delicious food. So excited to come back out again sometime.
So what was the one thing you ate?
We ate at this restaurant downtown, kind of in that theater district. I can't remember the name of it right now. We tried their appetizers and we had some steak, and it was just absolutely delicious.
We have some great restaurants here in Chicago. I love it. I mean, I love trying different cuisines, and new restaurants are popping up every day. So Michelin star chefs have been opening restaurants. Just amazing food. Yeah.
I may have pictures to prove it.
Well, this is the time of year to be in Chicago. So,
yes.
So Parminder, CEO and founder of TraknProtect.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you, let's just start there. Like, it'd be great to understand kind of the origin story. We love having founders on the show because it's just fascinating to hear why they started a company and their journey, and typically find that their journey started out somewhere else and it ended up here. So I would love you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So how much time do we have for this podcast? Because that could take the whole hour. Just kidding. No. Just I saw
we can take as long as you want.
Gosh, no. I'll give you the fast version. So actually, the company started with a simple comment from my children. It was my son would come home from college, and between him and my daughter, they would talk about, have you heard of this app? It can track this, it can track that. It really came out of a mom's need to know where stuff was in the house. So I just made a comment like, isn't there an app that tracks your crap? And that's really what started it, right? It's just like, because there was just so much stuff we had. We had iPads, cameras, all sorts of stuff all over the house. And I'd get the phone call, Mom, have you seen my XYZ? Or in the morning before school, have you seen that? Right? I mean, I'm sure you guys go through that. And that's really how it started, was to help moms like myself know what they had in their homes and where it was. And that was before tiles. So I'm an attorney by background, and went to a friend who said, you should build it. And I thought, you're crazy. I don't build things. I'm an attorney. I create paperwork, but I don't build. Right. And that turned into where he said, when will you ever take a chance on yourself? And I thought, okay. having gone through what I'd been going through personally, I thought, sure. And it took about 3 to 4 years to research. And I remember I'm not a technical founder, so I had to learn the technology, work with engineers. And I think one of the funniest statements was I would go in and say, I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, but can you help explain why we're doing it this way? And they would look at me, and finally one of the guys said, would you stop saying that? Because you come in and you scuttle everything we've done for the last 3 months, and we have to go back to the drawing board. So stop apologizing. You know what you want, and we appreciate it. So that led to building the solution. And I happened to get in front of Hyatt corporate office as part of a pitch event. And they said, wait, because I was like, hey, you might want to give this to your guests. So they leave with what they came with. And folks in there said, hang on, time out. Can we use it? Can we be the mom? Oh, that's a crazy thought. Tell me more. And that's, I think, part of my personality of how we've pivoted along the way is I always say, tell me more. Why? Why would you say that? What makes you think that? That led to us pivoting into hotels to do asset tracking, started as tracking rollaway beds, cribs, microwaves. And then the tagline became, well, you can get a Lyft or an Uber from down the street in under 3 minutes, but you can't get a rollaway bed for 45 minutes in a hotel. And that led to us being in several hotels. But what we found was people wanted the technology solution, but from a budget perspective, it was a nice to have item to allocate budget to it. Now, intuitively, we can say operational efficiency saves money. You can work with tighter staff volume and all of that. But at the end of the day, it felt like a little bit pre-COVID. It was like, out there, a little nice to have. But then that was also when the Me Too movement was taking off. There were laws around safety buttons coming around. And I was asked if we could do safety buttons. And going back to being an attorney, I thought, hang on, I don't think so. But then I thought, let me look into it and realize we could do it and use our technology to actually deliver safety in a more effective way and lower the bar for adoption by doing it in a very efficient manner. And that led to us within 6 months, we were one of the leading providers of safety technology. So that was a whole pivot. And that became one of our core products in our mission and our passion about really having an impact on the safety culture in the workplace. And especially as it relates to housekeepers in hotels and security staff. And then what else can we do, right? And then we were listening. And the one thing that we always did was, as we say, tell me more, we say, okay, how will you use this? What do you think about this? And that's led to such innovative approaches for us, is because I don't assume, because I don't come from hospitality, I don't assume I know the answer. I know how to ask questions. So I'll ask a question and let them help me design the product so that we can make sure we deliver on what they need versus what I feel they might want.
That must be the lawyer in you, the ability to ask questions.
I think so. I mean, but at a certain level, I'd like to believe I have more of a personality than an average lawyer. I think. Can you edit that out?
And so I'm just curious, and what were you hearing then early on when you asked those questions? Like what was hospitality like trying to solve at a more granular level when they're thinking about it in terms of, I guess, employee safety? What was the challenge?
When I was asked to develop the safety solution, I went to New York, I went to DC to research the solutions that existed. And fundamentally, there were solutions that, ultimately what I say to folks is, I'd rather you went with a competitor than if you go with just a sound alarm or a device you buy on Amazon, not knocking Amazon, but products that are not designed for hospitality, right? Because the solutions they were using were like sound alarms, or they were using solutions that require buttons to be recharged or change batteries. So you have to constantly change batteries because the batteries last maybe a couple of months. Required location beacons is what it's called, what you put in the rooms, and those required battery changes. So people were carrying D-cell batteries on property and buying hundreds of them. And now think about the engineer walking around having to fix plumbing issues, lighting issues, internet issues and all of that, and now having to change batteries and remembering to change batteries in every room every 6 months. it was just operationally inefficient. And also, they weren't giving exact location. You didn't know the system didn't work until you actually needed it and you pressed it. And then the cost was very high. So when you look at it that way, I went to hotels and I said to housekeepers, what do you want to see? What does it look like for you? And they would describe it. I want it to be light. I want it to be something, because what they would do is they would take their button, they would leave it on the housekeeping cart. And they would say, and I'd say, well, why? Because hoteliers were frustrated that we're spending so much money. We're spending 6 figures on this and you're not using it. So what's going on? And they were like, well, it's big, it's clunky. I'm like bending over a toilet and you're asking me to kind of have this kind of a clunky thing, just, waving around. So they would leave it on the cart, but then that's not delivering value. So that's really where I came in with like, okay, we could really streamline this. And then with hotels, the biggest frustration was deployment issues, not having it work when they needed it, not having adequate alerting systems, and then the cost. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, how can we design it to address both sides of the equation? And that's really how we came about.
Okay. So now I'm curious, even more curious. What is like, how does it work? I know I'm getting into the technical details, but I'm just fascinated because Karin can attest to this. We work with a lot of folks in kind of panic buttons, and you see even more out there across schools and hospitality and personal safety, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious now, and I think we've seen a variety of different ways of how these are architected. I'm curious what you discovered here and kind of what's unique.
So what's unique about us is that, like I said, we make it really simple. There's solutions that require multiple button presses, or they require multiple buttons to be pressed, right? And there's different ways of doing it. And, to me, and this is where I joke around, I watch way too much Law and Order. It's an addiction. I admit it.
I love Law and Order.
I love Law and Order. I love SVU, all that. I'm such a huge fan, have been for 20 years. And I think it's all these episodes that go through my head of what could go wrong. And I also go back to my life as an attorney, as someone who is in risk compliance, all about risk mitigation and how do you look at points of failure? Where will something fail? What are those points of failures and how can you prevent those from happening or mitigate the risk as that's happening? So the way we design the system is it's easy to use, easy to deploy, easy to maintain, and then actually even go further. How can we make our technology obsolete by integrating with what's already there in the guest rooms, whether that's access points, TVs, room control systems? How can we integrate with those to take out that maintenance piece of it? Because ultimately, hotels don't need another equipment to maintain. If you go into a hotel room, I'm sure you've seen, you travel as much as you do, Karin, there's so much in a room. Right? Now, think about the engineers that have to maintain that, the housekeepers, right? Everything you add to a room, somebody has to maintain it. So our approach has been, how do we integrate with what's already there? So what we're delivering is ultimately a safety technology that's kind of woven into the fabric of the hotel and not yet another solution they have to buy. So that's been my ultimate mission is, how do we weave safety into the fabric, which means you have to take away the friction of deployment. You have to take away the friction of use. How do I make sure everybody has it on them no matter when they need it? So we only have 2 rules for our housekeepers. And I say our housekeepers because I used to do the training and I would literally just say, I just need you to do 2 things. Always carry it with you, even to the bathroom when you're on shift, and press and hold it for 3 seconds. I don't need you to remember anything else. And we put it up in Spanish and Chinese and whatever different language posters around the hotel. And that's all we say. That's all you need to do. And it will call for help. And people say, well, what if it's a fire? What if it's, this? And my thought is, at that point, from a risk mitigation perspective, people can figure out what it is when they get there, or there's cameras that can detect what's happening in that area. what you want is someone to get there and provide the help. And that's our job. Now, it sounds simple, but we've taken all the hard work and, made our solutions so powerful that someone that uses this is like, oh my gosh, it's so easy. I don't have to like open up an app. I don't have to do this. I don't have to like jump up and down 3 times and then turn sideways and hop around. Nothing. You just press it and help will come. That's it. And I think that's what we offer to our customers.
So this seems super simple, and I've seen the device. Obviously, it's very small.
Yeah.
What then? It sounds great. Like, what's been the reaction from those who have to use it? I assume it's positive. But I'm curious. Like, I'd love to hear like the stories and kind of what the feedback has been after you listen to them. You design this for them. What's kind of been the experience?
So I've actually gone to properties and met the housekeepers, and they've said, we love that we can just attach it and there's no big red button on it. There's not like, hey, this is a safety button. There's no noise that comes out of it, which will make anyone, smash it, grab it, do anything with it. So they feel empowered. And the fact that the batteries last like 2-3 years, now I'm getting to the features and benefits, and I apologize, but fact is no one has to change the battery, right? That was the big thing I was trying to solve was you shouldn't have to change the battery because that's an operational inefficiency. And so, they're glad that they can just carry it with them. And then on the hotelier side, they don't have to worry about it. Did someone put it on charge properly? I don't know if you've done that. Have you put your phone on charge or thought you put it on charge or put your watch on charge and then realized it didn't charge because it wasn't plugged in at the back or something?
All the time.
One of the outlets at the hotel didn't work properly and it didn't charge my phone. Yeah.
Right. And isn't like for us, it's frustration, but what if your safety depended on it?
Right.
Right. I mean, now, if you're an employee and you expect it to be charged because the last person was supposed to put it on the charger and they didn't put it on the charge right, I mean, you're telling me my safety is compromised. So again, remember, I look at points of failure. That was one of the points of failure we were concerned about is the next person's depending on the last person to do their job right. And they were in a rush to go pick up the kid. And not that they intended to not put it on charge right, but they just didn't click it in properly or they didn't check if it was plugged in. Something happened. It just was a little wonky and tilted and it didn't charge properly. And the next person thinks it's charged and walks off and now it doesn't work. And now someone else's safety is compromised. So that's really where we did. It's a small button. They just carry it with them. And for the hoteliers, what we do is they get alerts in multiple different ways. And we make sure they get them. It's a persistent messaging system to sort of say, kind of like, let's say it's on your watch. It's like, hey, there's hey, hang on, hey, hang on. Have you checked? And it's that consistent messaging through multiple platforms to say, make sure you check. And like I say, I've watched too much Law and Order. So my thing is, I don't want it to turn off because if you guys remember, there's an episode where someone goes and does a wellness check on someone and they're like, I'm fine. And that's because someone else is standing behind the door saying, send them away. That's my fear is a housekeeper could be in a room and someone says, turn off your button. It should be a wellness check. Someone should go physically check them, make sure they're okay. So you're actually using the system to its full potential.
And so when you hold the button down for 3 seconds, what happens next?
It vibrates a little bit. It has haptic feedback, lets the housekeeper know it's been activated. There's a green light that flashes very discreetly that lets them, and also if they look at it and say, hey, did I press it? It'll say, yes, it's functioning. But then immediately it'll first send an alert to whoever the responders are. It could be the security team, the front desk, the managers, the executive housekeeper, anyone who's supposed to receive the alert and say there's been an alert. And that's the first one, location confirmation in progress. So that's the first alert that comes through. There's desktop alerts that come through on their computer. There's SMS notifications, push notifications, Teams notifications, all sorts, right? So they're getting it all different angles. So it doesn't matter what they're focusing on, these alerts come through. And now the thing is that, hey, I got to get up. So within 10 seconds of that, they'll get an alert and, if they have their phone. The big thing, one of the other applications that we looked at was you have to be logged into the app. to get the alert.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I was like, knowing me, I come into work, I'm dealing with 20 issues. I may forget to log into my app. I want the alert no matter what. If one of my people is in danger, I want to know. So that's why these alerts come. So they come by SMS and then they start coming and say, okay, approximate location is this. So you know which direction you're headed. And within a few seconds, it's location confirmed. It's like, great. You're running over there and you get there. And then the thing is, and then again, of course, law and order comes in. It's like, if I was the employee in distress, I'd be out of there. I'd be running down the hall, down the stairs, into another room, through the lobby, outside in the parking lot. Like, I'd be gone, right? If I could get away, I'd be running. So then my thought was, wait, back then it was like, they're not tracking where the employee is. They're tracking the last known location where the employee was. And I was like, well, that doesn't work for me. So again, and I'm very passionate about these things because I drove my engineering team nuts, right? Because I'd be like, what would happen if this happened? Well, what about this? Well, if I was in that scenario, I'd be panicking. So when they said, hey, maybe we make it that you should press it 3 times. And I said, hang on 1 second. You're telling me someone's attacking me and I'm going to say, stop. I got to count. 1, 2, 3. Okay, go.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. I'm not counting.
Yeah.
I'm like, my reaction is squeeze and hold.
Yes.
Can we use that? And they were just like, yeah, that makes sense. So Cassidy, I'm going to ask you a quick question.
Yeah, let's do it.
When you're walking through a parking lot in the dark, okay, no one's around and you're walking to your car, what are you doing for your safety?
I'm looking around, seeing
Okay.
who's around. Yeah.
What else?
I guess if I feel really unsafe, I have the phone ready, or I have whatever I have ready to go, in case there is an issue.
Karen, what do you do? Because I bet you she knows where I'm going with this.
I used to walk with my keys in my fingers just in case somebody came in attacked. I also not only look around behind my shoulder, have my phone ready, but I also am looking in the car before I approach it, back seat to front seat. Make sure that nobody is in there, around there. Make sure that nobody's messed with the door handle or anything like that too, because these are other ways that folks try to target and track women.
Right? It's such a different response. I'm telling you. And I'm not knocking it, but as a woman, our primary concern is our safety. Day or night, walk with a key between the fingers, right? So that I can jab them and run. That's the thing we've been taught since we were kids. And yet, you think about it. So this is where I bring that experience in as a woman, where I'd be like, okay, what if I was in the dark? Or what if I'm walking down the hallway? What would happen? What do we need to do? And I think that's what helped us design the solution as it is that I talk to housekeepers. I would walk down the hall and I would say, what would I want in this scenario? How can technology support me here? And what can we do to make them feel like, yes, you are going to be found when you need help? And I tapped into those early lessons we learn as women, how to protect yourself. I tapped into that to design this as what's my reaction, which is to squeeze and hold. What's my reaction is to hold the key. We've been taught that. How can I use that to design our technology to do that? Because let's be honest, as much as, not primarily this solution is for women that work in the workplace, right? Most of the housekeepers are women.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying 100%, but most are. Many don't speak English. How do you deliver a solution that is easy to use for someone who may be in danger but may not know how to communicate that to someone?
Yeah. I think you have that cultural aspect as well for some of these folks that don't want to call for help. They don't want to call 911 because they feel like they will get punished or reprimanded somehow for doing that. And so they avoid calling for help. And here's a way to still access that help in a way that makes them feel safe and secure in doing so.
You asked about how I designed the solution. One of the comments I heard then was that a couple of the housekeepers would say, I don't carry it with me. And I said, why? And their thing was, well, if I lose it, I have to pay to replace it. And it's like, okay. And that's where the cost came in, right? Because that was their way, let's say an employer's way of saying, hey, to make this financially viable for me, I'm going to provide it to you, but make sure you don't lose it. And maybe they meant it, maybe they didn't, but they said, if you lose it, you're going to have to pay to replace it. So the fear of loss was greater where they'd leave it in their locker versus the fear of their own safety. That's why we actually really looked at is how do we embed this into the fabric? I go back to that statement is take away the friction, whether it's technology friction, whether it's cost friction, whether it's implementation friction, so that it's so woven in that housekeepers are good to carry it. Like, yeah, I got this. And hoteliers and employers are good with providing this because it's not a huge burden.
It's interesting you mentioned the fear piece too, because I think fear often holds us back from doing what we know is the right thing. But we can say, well, I'm afraid if, and so cost being that factor is really, really interesting. I didn't think about that at first. Yeah.
So like I said, I would ask, like, I've gone to hotels where there was a woman who had a sound alarm and I was staying at the hotel and I said, oh, can I just see what you have? And she's like, yeah. And she pulled it out. I said, I hate to do this, but can you pull it? And we'll put the plate. It's like a little pin that comes out and then you can pin it back in to turn the alarm off. I was like, I hate to make the noise, but do you think you could do it for a quick second? And she's like, sure. Cause I was like, I just want to know what's the response in the area, right? What do people pop their head out? Do people what happens with the other house? And she did, she pulled the pin and nothing happened. And she looked at me, she goes, I guess it doesn't work. And I went, oh, how do you feel about that? And she's like, well, if they cared, they'd get us something better. And I was just like, and so then I said, what do you think stops them? She goes, cost. She knew that, right? She said, probably because it cost too much. And that's where we were like, okay, how do we again go back? And how do we use that information? Now, I could say, oh, well, yeah, hotels are just going to have to realize they got to pay for it. Well, sure, right? But again, how do we make this adoption so much so that it's like saying the same thing over again, but woven into the fabric? Like where it's just such a fundamental product that you provide to your employees. That's just part of the game. It's just like I give you a uniform, I give you this, I give you a button. It's part of that culture, part of the whole process. And no question about it.
It seems, from the outside, this just seems logical. Like, this is what you would do for your employees. I'm curious, where, from your perspective, is the hospitality industry on kind of the adoption of these types of technologies, or the seriousness of kind of caring? I assume there's maybe some laws popping up where they kind of got to pay lip service to this and have some type of solution, but versus others who are consciously looking at like what is the best solution. So how would you characterize the market landscape at the moment?
So I'll go back to the history of safety buttons. Yes, there have been issues all along, right? Many a times, but it really goes back to Dominic Strauss-Kahn case back in 2011. That kind of started it all in New York, and then it became law in Seattle initially, which the first real law came out of Chicago because the Seattle law was then put on hold, and then Chicago came out, and then Miami Beach, and then all of these laws have sprouted up, and Seattle came back, and state of Washington, and so on. They're required. But one thing I'll tell you about the one statement I hate hearing from folks, and I hear it all the time. And I'll share that. But I'll say, at a fundamental level, since the AHLA 5-star promise came out, there has been a genuine shift in recognizing that there is a problem. And I'll say this, owners do care. It seems like maybe they don't, right? It's about profitability, but let's look at all the things they have to do. They also have to respond to their investors. They have to manage profitability because if people can't make money, they can't do this. So, and it's a very highly regulated industry where there's so many licensing fees and taxes and food and beverage tax. And you hear about like soda tax and this tax and that tax and this act and that act. Again, union requirements, right? It actually is one of the most regulated industries. And owners are trying their best. I work with some of the most fantastic ownership and management groups. They genuinely care. They care about building their employees and promoting them and helping them excel. But fundamentally, it comes down to is what can I, and I hate to put it this way, but where can I check the box? And where do I really put the money in? And the stuff that people invest the money in is typically what will drive revenue, what will get more heads in beds, right? And that's typically Wi-Fi solutions and things within the hotel, like what amenity they can provide. And unfortunately, it's as guests, as travelers, we're like, yeah, give me Wi-Fi for free. Would we say that, hey, charge me an extra $5 per guest? I'm willing to pay for your employee safety. No, because we said, no, you should take care of that. Right. So because they're so overburdened, it really is like, when I talk to owners, it's a cost. And it is where they're like, okay, where do I balance the cost? And where can I check the box? And where can I get away with it? And so owners are constantly at odds with, they know what the right thing to do is. And sometimes they feel cornered because they have to make these difficult decisions. So again, I go back to as technology providers, and if we're really committed to this, then we need to make sure that we're providing the technology in a way that we're lowering that friction bar. It's a responsibility we have. If we're truly passionate about empowering employees, we need to come up with the solutions as well, and not just simply put it on the owners and say, well, do the right thing. Let's not preach. Let's help them make the right decision. And so that goes along with so many other factors that we can put in play. So I'll say most owners out there, I feel, know what the right thing to do is, know what the right solution is for their employees. And we just need to facilitate that conversation. And it's also lack of education. So I say that we as providers have a responsibility to educate the owners on what are the differences of the different technologies and what is it that might work. I mean, maybe our solution isn't the right fit. But the only thing I say to anyone I talk to is, I'll say, go with a competitor, please. But please don't buy anything from Amazon, because that is not the right thing. That is not the right solution. But do the right thing is, I don't care. You want to save money, you want to go with a competitor, hey, power to you. I appreciate that. And whenever you're ready, we're here.
So it seems like the economic side of this is obviously a substantial decision. What's something like this actually cost per employee? I mean, I know it ranges based on the solution, but it sounds like you've tried to engineer this to be to remove friction, and I assume this is one of the friction points. So we don't normally talk about this, but seeing how important this is, I'd love to hear kind of your view of just what's this look like as a traveler? Like, is it $5 I'd have to pay to like what? How do I think about this in terms of the cost to keep employees more safe?
So I'll say, because the infrastructure costs, we can do away with that by integrating with your existing technologies. So I'm not going to, the implementation cost can be depending on how big a hotel it is, and what areas I want to cover. It can vary. You've really put me on the spot here. Jeez.
We can always edit this one out.
All good. No, it's all good. What I'm going to say is that our goal is to keep it between $10 and $15 per employee per month. Because if you look at the revenue, whether it's a limited service hotel or whether it's a luxury hotel, that's a cost they can certainly afford on an ongoing basis. So our goal really is to keep it about $10 to $12 per employee per month. And that's actually, cost of 2 Starbucks coffees, right? Per month per employee.
Depending on what size you get, it may be one.
Yeah. Or if you get extra, caramel, extra foam, extra this. Yeah. But I want to go back to something I had mentioned to you. There's a statement I hate hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Let's hear it.
that statement is, I've been doing this for 25 years. And this has never been a problem at any of the hotels or any of the XYZ places I've been at. And I have to say, I hear it. I still hear it. I don't challenge it because I don't know what your experience has been, right? And maybe it didn't happen. But how many of us can say we've actually walked in our employees' shoes every single day to see what they experience? So that may be your experience as a manager or as an asset manager or as a corporate person, but is that really the experience of the employee is the first question I have. And the second response I have is that is fantastic. I am so glad that's never happened. But are you willing to take the risk where the first time, the one and only time it happens, it weighs on your conscience for the rest of your life? Because I've actually had a GM which had to deal with that, where a woman was sexually assaulted on her watch, and it completely traumatized her. And she said, we were going to get it. We delayed the decision. We didn't get it. And one of my housekeepers was assaulted. And I've got to live with that.
Yeah, intuitively, when I hear that statement, to your point, I have to call BS on this. I mean, it's now that I've hung out with Karin, and she can get to her stories in a second on hotels. But when I'm in a hotel and I'm like, you walk down a hallway and you just see the one housekeeper and there's nobody else around, you're like, man, this doesn't feel safe, especially knowing how many, less than desirable people can be out there in the world. So is there data on this in terms of how frequent this happens, or how do you think about it in terms of is it like the frequency? I'm sure hotels don't like sharing this. It's hard to do the research on it. And to your point, a lot of people probably, given the situation, the employment situation, probably don't speak up unless it's a very severe issue. Yeah, they don't report it.
They don't report it. And so I'll say the data that's out there, when the Chicago law was passed, I think the data was that almost 80% of the housekeepers report being sexually harassed or assaulted.
80%.
80% of hotel employees. Yeah. So front desk staff, everyone, right? And so when you look at it that way now, that was the data that was presented by a union. And so is it correct? Was it totally on? I don't know. Was it biased? I don't know. But I'll tell you that when I've done trainings in a hotel and I've gone to a hotel, there was one day, and this story stands out in my mind. There was one day I walked into a Chicago hotel and I was doing the training and someone ran in and she's like, oh my God, I needed this button this morning. And I was like, well, I'm here to train you, but tell me why this morning, what happened? And she said, happens at least once a week. I was like, okay, what? And she said, well, I went up to the floor. I was pushing out my cart. I was getting off the elevator and I was entering the main hallway into the hotel hallway. And there was a man who was in the nude walking towards me saying, I've locked myself out and I don't know how to get back into my room. And I remember we don't have floor phones anymore. They've done away with that. And I was like, wait, it happens at least once a week? Yeah. Would you call that an assault? Maybe not assault on the eyes, I say, because maybe it's a view I want to see. But let's put a different perspective on it. You and I go to the office. If we see something we don't want to see, we'd be like, dude, that is so inappropriate. No. This is their office. Can we think of it that way? This is their workplace, but people act as if the hotel is an extension of their bedroom and it gives them the license to misbehave. Right? And what floored me was she said it happens at least once a week to one of us.
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding? Now, this is about 4 or 5 years ago, I bet. But still, that's not very long ago when you think about it.
I would believe it. I mean, even take that 80% number. Let's assume it's inflated by 2x. 40% is unacceptable.
I can tell you it's probably somewhere between 50 and 80. It also depends on the, what's the word, severity of whether it's an assault versus, like I said, describe the situation of just, someone just walking out and saying, I've locked myself out. First of all, why would you walk out without a towel? But okay. Seriously?
There is, a criminal code, it's indecent exposure. And sometimes people just want to be seen. But what that does to another person, it does make you feel unsafe and you don't know what could happen next. And so you start playing those what ifs in your head and you have to have a plan. So what if they do approach me in an attempt to assault? What do I do? And so here's your like insurance plan, right? It's right here in your little hand.
That's exactly it. I mean, if they were walking down the street, they'd get arrested, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But they're walking in a hotel. No one arrests them because, they kind of lock themselves out. And I'm just like, okay, I don't get it. I personally don't get it. But it happens more often than we think. And that's what floors me. So I'm like, for me, it's not even about the most severe acts that happen, and they do happen, and they're in the news, and we focus a lot on that, and then we say, okay, how often does that happen? Well, that may not happen every day, but here are things that do happen every day. Can we start with addressing these? And then if this can also address this, isn't that great? Because now we've covered the full gambit. And that's my goal here, is that I want to walk in and say, I'm so glad you haven't heard of this, but I'm so sure you're missing a lot of this.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because in your neighborhood, when you're buying a house or going to rent an apartment, you can kind of do a search to find, sexually violent predators or sexual predators within your community, right? You don't know who's next door to you in a hotel. You don't know who's checking in. You don't know who's coming through your lobby. You don't know who's coming into a conference.
You don't know who's following behind you as you're going down the hallway to your room, which has happened to me, right? Where they're like, oh, what's your room number? I'm like, well, turn around, go back to the lobby and be like, could you walk me to my room, please? That's as a guest, right? Now, I would love for the next level of safety technology to also be available to guests. And there's a huge liability issue where, will that happen? When will that happen? I don't know. But I think fundamentally, I would like to know as a guest that I can be protected, because that does happen. You do go to your room late at night and you are walking down the hallway by yourself. And that happens. But as employees, definitely, we should be protecting them.
Yeah, one thread I'd love to pull on this is it feels like this would be a good kind of employee retention / hiring value prop if done correctly. But that's easy for me to say. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of like the hiring manager and the type of employee that does this job. The market's obviously tight when it comes to resources as well. So like, how does this dynamic play out today in hospitality in terms of bringing in housekeepers and so forth and so on? And does this play a role in that? Or is that just like we would like it to play a role in that, but the reality is it's not part of the decision-making process for either the employee or the hiring manager?
I don't think it's talked about. That's the thing. I don't think even hiring managers realize that it's a tool they can offer. It's sort of like saying, and to me, it's like medical coverage, right? People say, what are the benefits you provide whenever you interview for a job? It's like, hey, what do my benefits look like? And I think this needs to be a bullet point that we add, that we provide medical insurance, we provide life insurance, we provide workers' comp, and we provide a safety button because we're invested in you. And because it's seen as a cost and not as an insurance, that's sort of the dynamic we need to overcome. But does it help retain? Yes. So there's actually stats out there, since I know you love stats. There's stats that when you have safety buttons, it actually does decrease incidences by 24%. And then I've actually done presentations with a dear friend who's an insurance broker, where he's done research on data of incidences in hotels for safety. And he's found that it's like for underwriting, it's one of the things that can help you mitigate insurance costs. But he's also said it's one of the things that underwriters look at, right? Because when you have workers' comp claims, now there isn't clear stats on injuries. What were they caused by? I mean, was the twisted ankle caused by because she was running down the hall away from someone else? Or was it because she slipped and fell into the shower, right, as she was cleaning it? So fact is, the twisted ankle is documented. The injuries are documented, the medical emergencies, and assaults aren't documented in that way, other than they were sent to the hospital and they were hurt on the job. But the specifics aren't always documented, right? So we don't have clear data on what were the cause of the injuries. But what, as he said, is it can help, mitigate your workers' comp claims, because the more claims you have, the greater your premium, right? So if you can mitigate the issues and the circumstances, then chances are you can reduce the number of claims, which means manage your premium cost. So there are intuitive connecting the dots. There just isn't clear enough data for us to say X leads to Y. But there's certainly enough data points that lead us to believe that having this solution in place allows people to get help faster. There was a hotel, a woman fell in the stairwell, and they didn't have panic button solution at the time. And she'd been screaming. She literally, the way she fell, her bone was protruding out of her ankle. Like, that's how badly she broke it. Took them more than 4 to 5 hours to get to her because she was in a stairwell. No one could hear her. She was screaming. No one walked by. Like you said, when you're walking down the hall, hardly anyone there sometimes. It happened to be during the day. And she sat there for 4 to 5 hours screaming until finally another guest heard her. They called down. Someone came. Now, did that lead to permanent damage for her ankle? I don't know. But wouldn't it have been better if she had been provided the help sooner so she could get the
obviously.
attention she needed?
Yeah, 4 to 5 hours sitting there with a broken ankle just sounds awful.
Excruciating. I can't even imagine, how much pain she must have been in.
So one thing I want to kind of, as we get to the end of this, is how does escalation to emergency response or 911 play a role in this? So I'd love us to kind of, what from an education perspective would we want to share with, those in public safety listening to this to say, fabulous, I'm glad we're providing safety technology for hospitality, but like, what's our role in this, and how do we get notified?
It's a critical role, right? I think it's very critical because what happens is we all focus, again, I'm going to go back to we focus on the luxury hotels, right? Which have a security team and they have a response team and they have this. But if you look at the average size of a hotel in the US, it's 115 rooms, average. There's actually, out of the 53,000 hotels in the US, most of them are actually below 150 rooms. So when you look at that, because average, just remember 115, so most of them are actually below 150. And that ends up being smaller hotels. Smaller hotels mean, fewer staff members. I remember being in New York, being at a hotel where overnight it was just one guy at the front desk. And if you had to call down and you needed something at 10 p.m., he would lock the front door. He would run, bring it up to you, and he'd come down and open the door so that anyone checking in late could walk in. Right? So think about that. You've only got that one person. So who's going to call for help if he's hurt? Who's he calling? And great, you have a safety button solution. Kudos to that. But who's that alert going to be able to respond? Because the GM could be 2 hours away or an hour away or, wherever the other staff members are. So this is a great way to provide that coverage. It's sort of supplement your staff with that check-in and we do it in parallel with our partnership with RapidSOS, is that when our clients have this module, they're able to get alerts to the team member and to 911 or have RapidSOS call the property and confirm there's an emergency and call 911, whichever way they want it, but do it in parallel so people can get the help as they need it. So this is really critical for hotels, for most of the hotels in the US, which have, especially in like between that third shift, right? Where they have very few staff members on site and they need help.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, I grew up in rural America and, I would travel around for work in my early days, and you would stay at these small hotels and, towns of 10,000 people. And there's always one person at night. That's it. Just one person.
Then what happens if they're hurt?
Yeah.
So who gets the help, right? Who gets the alert? Because it could be at 3 a.m. and the person who's supposed to be responding is sleeping and doesn't see the alert, right? You're not going to wait till the morning to find out something happened. You want to be able to get them help now. So to me, it's a critical piece that really rounds out our entire offering that we offer to our customers, is that, we want to give you the peace of mind and your staff the peace of mind by completing that equation.
All right. So I like to start wrapping this up with my typical types of questions. And this is, what are you bugging your engineering team about next? So like, what's on the horizon? What's the future of this look like? Obviously you've innovated a lot in this space today. What's next? When you're going and talking to them and saying, hey, why don't we do this and this and this for the next generation or whatever? What's that look like?
Yeah, Tim would tell you every week she comes in with some idea and she says, yeah, we need to do this. And he's like, hold on, let's talk about this. But the one that I've been bugging him about, we actually launched two-way communication devices about a year ago, or maybe a little longer. And what we're doing is we're relaunching because of just the form factor and things that, it wasn't flowing. Again, my goal is to reduce friction, and it wasn't flowing as smoothly as I needed it to. So we actually are relaunching our two-way communication devices. But what we're doing is we're customizing the solution to the property's needs. So what that means is, if you're a large property and you have a security staff and you want the housekeeper to have a two-way communication, but you want to have some folks have just the basic safety button, or you want them to have something else, we are customizing it so we can do role-based solution. So security staff can have a device which also has a panic button, by the way, but they can respond, they can use the app, they can do translations, live translations. So you could be speaking in Spanish, I speak English, that's real-time translations. And we're able to communicate with one another. And yet the housekeeper needs the two-way communication, but in a different way. And so we're pricing everything differently. So it's priced based on roles and the device, and then it's used, different roles can have different buttons. So basically, instead of having, we just have this one device and that's it. And it's either you choose us and everybody gets this, or you choose them and that's it. We're saying, hold on, we got to meet. If we're really passionate about safety, we have to think about all the different people. So I'm thinking about the bar staff. We have stationary buttons that you can put on under bar carts, because people get drunk, people get inappropriate, people become violent when they're drinking, right? And the fact that Chicago had to pass a law that if you actually become verbally abusive with a hotel front desk clerk, you can be arrested. The fact that we have to mandate this in Chicago, tells you the kind of culture we live in today. So with the time, we need to be able to offer different solutions for different folks. And that's what we've done. We've basically taken our solution and said, you tell us who you want to protect. You tell us where you want us to protect them, and we will customize the solution for you. And we will offer you all different, and you tell us the kind of implementation you want. You want gateways. What do you have in your rooms? You want access points, us to integrate with access points. We can integrate with room control systems, and now we can even integrate with TVs. So you tell us the environment you want, and we will meet you where you are. So you don't need to kind of meet us. We will meet you where you are. to provide you with that solution. And that's really where our passion for safety comes in, is we want to do it for everyone.
If folks are listening to this, is it just hospitality, or if I'm like in a distribution center, can I call you up and say, hey, I have employees and there's, they fall down and they get hurt or they feel unsafe?
We're industry agnostic. We're passionate about safety for all employees. So teachers, again, everyone focuses on the big issues that happen in schools. And Alyssa's law is being passed where teachers in schools have to carry panic buttons, right? And it's now passed, and I want to say between 10 to 11 states today, as of today. So it's for teachers. But, the one thing that I feel folks don't focus on, teachers are getting, when two students are fighting, that happens almost every day versus the big issues we focus on, right? So again, going back to that, can we help them with the day-to-day issues which impact their safety, of whether they're going to get hurt trying to separate the two students? Are they going to, because they're not allowed to get into the middle of it now, right? Because they could get hurt. Well, can we help them address that versus, just the big issue that happens? And I'm talking mass shootings and things like that, right? I mean, that seems to be the focus, but I think we need to address the day-to-day. Same thing with, nursing staff. They're dealing with the day-to-day of someone having dementia, someone being on medications that just cause them to do something that may not be part of their normal personality. This individual just goes off the rails. Again, I want to give everyone the benefit of doubt. I don't think the intention, of course, there's people that have the intention to hurt. But many a times it might be unintentional or it's an accident, but that doesn't mean safety is dispensable.
Most people aren't locking themselves out of the room naked.
True story. Yeah. When you talk about the school safety piece too, I even think about stories I've seen where bus drivers have gotten attacked or have had medical emergencies and the kids may not know what to do. They could even press that button on behalf of someone else that's experiencing that emergency.
Actually, I talked to our transit authority recently and they talked about that. They said on the bus, we're like, we got the bells and whistles, we got the button, we got we got the tracking device. But as soon as the bus driver leaves the bus to go grab a coffee, they're vulnerable because they're not allowed to have their phone on them and they're vulnerable. So can you help us connect the dots here? And I think those are the things that we really saw. I was like, oh my gosh, I commend you for looking at this, right? Because they're like, how do we complete this whole equation here? And I think that's the thing we have to look at is it happens when you least expect it. And so how can you protect them all along that whole journey that someone has as they're in their employment? Shuttle drivers. Everyone says, yeah, but they have two-way radios. Yes, they do. You're telling me, and I'm not going to say if I'm attacking them, if someone's attacking them and their radio's hanging above them and they have to grab it to talk to someone, you're telling me that someone's not going to be able to intervene and prevent them from calling for help.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think of this, that's a great way to think about it is in the world that we live in today, from a technology perspective, we should all just have this technology and be able to get help. I mean, it just exists. And so the fact that we still, either working or walking late at night or whatever, feel unsafe, we should take a step back and ask ourselves, why are we not using technology to solve that problem for us?
College students, right? I mean, go out at night and things like that. But, I'll tell you why. The thing is, this has given us a sense of security, right? We carried this with us and we think, oh, I can call 911. I can press the button on the side and I can call for help. But honestly, what's the first thing that you see when someone comes up behind you and pushes you? This thing's gone and you're left vulnerable. Or someone grabs and smashes their foot on it, you're left vulnerable. We're assuming this will protect us, and it will. It's very capable. It can. But what if you don't have this? What's your backup?
With my 911 hat, we drive the message into folks so much, call 911, call 911. And we also drive a lot of technology partners like We still need people to make the voice call. Great. There's that moment when they can, and it's that what if, and if when, what do they do? And so I would challenge, some of our public safety folks that might be listening to this podcast. We have to think outside of the fact that, yes, they may be carrying this around and they may be able to call 911 and tell us verbally what the emergency is and what they need. And in that moment that they can't, we have to have a solution that still gets their location, because that is the most critical piece of information needed, in a quick and efficient fashion. So we're not responding 4 hours later to find somebody with a broken ankle, but that we know where to send help. And likely we'll get more information as the call unfolds on what that emergency may be. But at least we have an indication of an emergency and a location. I can work off of that.
Yeah. I mean, and how many times do you really have it in your hand, right? Many a times it's in your purse, it's in your pocket, it's in your, for me, it's an extension of my limb. But, for most of us, it is.
Yeah. Fortunately, for when I look at my kids, it's always in their hand. So, I guess that's good.
From a safety perspective, it's good, but as long as they don't drop it when they need it.
That's true.
And that's really what I come back to is it's not something that just, my phone's pretty big. I feel like it would be the first thing I would drop. I've dropped it 100 times, even when my dog bumps into me, right? It's sort of like, it's the first thing to go. So that's where I think about it is like, it's not a little tiny thing I carry with me that's discreet, that's easy to press. And plus, for me to get help, I first have to unlock it, then I have to get to the phone, then I have to dial 911. Can I just press it and get help?
I love it. Well, Parminder, this has been fascinating. We love talking to companies like yours. We love partnering with companies like yours and hearing the story and the passion about keeping us all safer in this world. Last question is, how do people find you and your company if they want to learn more?
TraknProtect.com. Just come to our website, email us at sales@TraknProtect.com, and someone will respond to you within 12 hours is what we say.
I love it.
Yeah.
Reducing the friction.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. Super appreciate it. And Karin, as always, great seeing you.
You too.
Great to meet you both. Thank you for having me. This was really great.
Our pleasure. And thanks for being a great partner.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Safety Gap. This podcast is powered by RapidSOS, where we're dedicated to closing the safety gap through intelligent safety technology. If you're passionate about creating a safer, smarter world, be sure to follow The Safety Gap wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information and to catch up on past episodes, visit us at RapidSOS.com.